Hare Krishna. So, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhyavacha Paritnam Bhavanebhyo Vaiṣṇavebhyo Namo Namaha. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamam Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Okay, so how did I come to Krishna consciousness? I'll speak a little bit about that and see if that's useful for anyone. My father is born in Punjab, in northern India. My mother also. So when my father was young, he went to study in Haridwar, which is a very famous religious place on the banks of the Ganges in northern India. So he did a 14-year degree in Sanskrit called Vedalankar. And then after that he got married and then he moved to Africa. So I was born in East Africa, Kenya, and I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. And my father was very, very strict, like that. So no meat, no alcohol, no this, no that, and you have to be up early and learn, do so many things. But my mother was very loving and kind. So, my father was a priest, and then when I was 6 years old, my mother passed away, and I was kind of sick, so I didn't really understand what was happening. It was bewildering for me. And also she was like very kind and loving. My father was more strict and a little harsh, so then fine. But my elder sisters were much, much older than me. So when I first went to primary school, my eldest sister, she was a teacher in that school. So sometimes I'd go and sit in her class and be the mascot. If her class was going on an outing or going swimming, I would tag along. In Africa, you could get away with that, So then, at one point, 1971, my father was invited to come to the UK and be the priest of a Hindu temple in Leeds, in Yorkshire. So then he came with myself and my brother and sister. My eldest sister had already been married in Africa, and the eldest brother, he was already here working. So then we came in 1971, and this temple that we stayed in the priest quarters, was nice. It was a building in its own grounds, and I went to school. I used to live in the temple, priest quarters, and there was a deity of Radha and Krishna in the temple. I was only 8 years old at the time. But then what happened is some devotees from Bhaktivedanta Manor, Bhumadev, Ravati Nandan Swami and some other Prabhupada disciples, they were traveling and they came to stay at the Hindu temple in Leeds, and they were doing some programs at Leeds University. So at 8 years old, I didn't really know that much philosophy or anything, but I just thought they were nice people. And one devotee, Bhumadev, he remembers he used to pick me up and carry me and give me prasad and things, so maybe that's where the seed was planted. And then later my father, he was transferred to another job in London, and he became the priest of the Hindu temple in Southall in Lady Margaret Road, West London. And I used to live in the priest quarters there. It was just me and my father there because my brother and sister were still studying in Leeds. And I used to stay in the priest quarters and go to school. And then 1979, the devotees from here, Akhandadi, Balabhadra and other devotees, they came to the Hindu temple and they did a Hare Krishna festival. And they did this drama called the Shamantaka Jewel, and they did kirtan and prasadam and spiritual talk. And then after that, in the upstairs hall, they did a weekly program for the youth called Mahabharat Youth Clubs every Friday night. So there were 60 or 70 youth that were coming there. So, and of course many of us had challenging questions, and we were kind of a bit rebellious, and of course they had electric kirtan, they had synthesizer, electric guitar, they had madanga and harmonium and other things, kartals, but we did electric kirtan, and then also the challenging questions that we had. Akhandadi was very, very scientifically minded, and he would defeat us, with all the nonsense theories, the Big Bang theory, or the flaws in Darwin's theory, and the life is a combination of different chemicals and all that. He would defeat us, and we'd come back with more arguments the next week and defeat it. So you know what they say: if you can't beat them, join them. So after a year of chanting and visiting the temple every Sunday and doing the Friday program, youth program, I could hardly avoid it, because my room was here, the hall was just 10 meters up, next to where I was. I couldn't really avoid it, So anyway, we went along with it. So me and about 10 or 12 other devotees, Dwarkapuri, Atmanivedana Maharaj, Shruti Dharma, Pranabandhu, Ananda Vigraha, Jai Krishna, Radha Damodar, Hari Ram, so many others. We all joined the temple together, 1980. 10 or 12 of us. So then, as soon as we joined the temple, we went traveling, and we traveled all over the country, and we used to stay in Hindu temples, because there was no ISKCON temples around the country at that time. It was only Bhaktivedanta Manor and Soho Street.
Berry Place, or?
Yeah, well, it was Berry Place in the beginning, but then it moved to Soho Street when Berry Place was closed. So, yeah, so then we just did door-to-door Sankirtan all over the country. Like Leicester in 1980, we did Leicester door-to-door twice over, selling books and things. And one time in Leicester, I think it was 1981 or something, we were going door-to-door, and we knocked on this door, and this young man came to the door, and he was very stylish, and he had like the Elvis hairstyle and the Elvis clothes, Elvis Presley. So we said to him, we're monks, we've got these books, and they're really nice, and they teach you how to get inner peace and many other spiritual benefits. So he bought some books, and he had a jar that he would put all his loose change from after work, So he emptied the jar into a bag and gave it to us, and he took some books. So we told him that we are staying at the Hindu temple in Highfields, which wasn't too far from where he was. And we said, if you need any more books or you have any questions on what you read, you can come and ask us for the next month or so. We're going to be there. So anyway, after some time, he did eventually come, and he said, I'm reading in the book this and this, what does this mean, And then he said, have you got another book and that? So we gave him another book. But then we told him the next day was Lord Nityananda's appearance day, and we didn't have a temple there, but there was a life member, quite a wealthy family, and they had invited us to their home for kirtan and a feast. So we told this boy that we had met, the Elvis Presley boy, why don't you come, So fine, he cycled there, next day, and there was 10 of us devotees, and the family had cooked 22-course meal, Yeah, and we did lots and lots of kirtan and pastimes of Lord Nityananda. And when it came to prasadam, because when we were traveling, it was very meager, our prasadam was very basic, Sometimes we'd just eat khichdi and we'd put the cloth on the floor, but this Hindu temple was kind of really run down, and sometimes on the cloths that we put on the floor, and we were taking a prasadam, there'd be cockroaches walking across the cloth. So if your khichdi was crunchy, then it would have extra protein, yeah. Anyway, so the prasadam was so nice, we piled up our plates like, Govardhan Hill. And then this new boy who just came for the first program, he was watching us and how much prasadam we were putting on our plates. So then he thought, that's how you meant to do it. So he piled up his plate as well, and then he was eating. But then at the end of the program, he'd eaten so much that he couldn't cycle. So Sakya Ras had to put his bicycle in the car and give him a lift home. And then when we were leaving Leicester, he got his rucksack ready and he was waiting for us on the road that leads out from Leicester, and then he came and joined the temple, 1981, and then he ended up becoming the head pujari. Yeah, Gadadhar, you know. Yeah, so he joined the temple. So like that, we did door to door all over the country, distributing many, many books, and we did festivals. And so I joined Bhaktivedanta Manor 1980, and yeah, so then 1988, I left the manor to go to Scotland. Godruma Bihārī temple had just opened, maybe a year or maybe a year or two, that's all, you know. So I went there because Balabhadra or Puri Maharaj was the first, he was our Bhakta leader, he had trained us, you know. So I went there and I knew it was going to be austere, but I didn't know it was going to be that austere, you know. So then for 17 years I was up in Scotland distributing books. I was the cook for about a year or something. I used to cook for devotees, and we were doing, you know, Namhata programs in Edinburgh and Glasgow and Stirling and all over the place. And then for 7.5 years I was the Sankirtan leader for the travelling parties. So we had a Sankirtan house in Yorkshire, and I was in charge of all those travelling party boys and book distributors. So we would distribute books, and we would also run preaching programs in Liverpool, in Blackpool, and in Lancaster, in York, in Sheffield, in Leeds, in Bradford, in Hull, those kind of places, you know. So we met a lot of devotees over that time. And then I travelled in a motorhome for 3 years on the road constantly with a devotee called Nrsimha-Vallabha. He was Bhakta Ian in the beginning, because he had just recently joined, and he got himself arrested 3 times on the one day in Edinburgh by the same cop. So the temple president says, look, here's a motorhome, get this boy out of Scotland, take him somewhere and go and, you know, get him out of Scotland. You know, he's been arrested 3 times on the same day by the same cop. So we don't want him to go to prison or something, you know. Anyway, so we traveled for 3 years and we distributed books. We cooked our prasadam. It was a nice Mercedes motorhome. We had a shower, we had a cooker, we had a heater, and we would only go back to the temple to fill up more books, you know. Yeah, so that was a great adventure. We'd park up anywhere by the ocean or in the field or wherever we wanted, just fill up the water tanks at night. And we did a lot of preaching, and it was like we were compact, you know. And then we tried something. Me and Nrsimha-Vallabha were not on that level. I mean, he was Bhakta Ian first, and then after some time he got initiated, Nrsimha-Dev Das, you know, Nrsimha-Vallabha now. So then every day we would have khichdi, and on a Sunday we would have dal and rice cooked separately, and it seemed like a feast. And then we weren't on that level, but we tried something. We tried to leave any food that we had in the motorhome, we'd leave it at Godruma Bihārī temple, and we'd just drive out only with books. And then we'd go to Lancaster, or we'd go to Lake District or some other place and distribute books in the street, and then we'd do door to door in the evening. And then we'd ask people, to take a book and give a donation. We'd ask them to say Gauranga. Then we'd say, well, you know, we're monks, so we don't use any of the money that you give us for ourselves, but if you would like to donate some fruit or vegetables or uncooked rice or uncooked flour or milk or butter, then we can utilize that for cooking. So some people who didn't want to give a donation because they didn't really trust us or didn't know what we were doing, they wouldn't give a donation, wouldn't take a book. We asked them to say Gauranga. What's Gauranga? I said, it just means be happy. And I said, well, would you like to give some food? So one guy said, okay, well, he didn't take a book, he didn't give a donation, but then he went to look in his kitchen and he came back with some fruit and some milk or some other uncooked rice. And then he said, you know what, I wasn't sure about you guys, but he said, you know what, I think you're probably genuine monks because you're begging your food, you know. So he said, I'll give you a donation of money as well. So I said, fine, I'll give you a book as well then. So we had fun, we did. And then I did 17 years of preaching in Scotland, and then I went to Yorkshire, then I lived in Yorkshire for 8 years, and then I worked, as a taxi driver and some other jobs, and all the time I would preach, I would keep books in a car, and I'd be, telling people about Krishna all the time, because I think once you're a preacher, that's what you do, that's your, what modus operandi, is that right? Well, yeah, so fine, that's what I do, that's all we've been trained in. And then in 2014, Shruti Dharma Prabhu, he asked me to come back to the Manor here and help with the preaching activities here, because Bhaktivedanta Manor is a very big temple. It's one of the flagship temples in the world, ISKCON flagship temple in the world. So it's many different departments, and so many thousands of people come here, and there are lots of kind of preachers required, and different services to do. So I've been doing that. So next year is 2024, so it'll be 10 more years here than since I came back. So now I'm doing fundraising for the temple, and I'm doing congregational development, I'm doing preaching to people who come and visit the temple, and we do house programs. Today I was with Atavi Krishna at the house program, in somewhere near Watford, and we try to help people on their spiritual journeys. And I find that when we go to people, rather than thinking, I'm going to go there to get some money, I'm going to go there and get something from that person, I'm going to get some service, I'm going to get something. My mood is that I don't want to go there with the take mentality, I want to go there with the give mentality. So you don't go there with the pound signs in your eyes, or the dollar signs, or the peso signs in your eyes. You go there to give them Krishna, to give them prasad, to give them some knowledge of Krishna, to help them one step closer to Krishna. And when they feel that you care about them, then they become very happy, and you actually make friends with them. So I think that's for me that method works, and over the years I made friends with so many people, and then they've actually opened up their hearts and done many services and given money and given other things and done many things. So they feel like it's reciprocation, So one man we were cultivating and looking after, he came for 30 years he had been coming, but he didn't give anything for the road or the new building or the Goshala, and people are saying, he's a freeloader, just comes to eat, But me and one other devotee, we always were respectful, we always talked to him, always tried to encourage him to chant and different things. We never treated him negatively. Then one day he came and he asked me and one other devotee, he said, can I speak to you somewhere quiet? So we went in the theater when, it was quiet. So he was speaking, he said, I've just been getting some realizations lately, I'm going to get my retirement fund soon, and I've done many things in my life. He said, I'm just starting to appreciate how much Krishna is doing for me. He says, because the air I'm breathing, the water that I'm drinking, food that I'm having, the ground that I'm walking on, the sunlight, so many things is given by Krishna. And he says, and what am I doing for Krishna? He said, practically nothing, So then he brought out his checkbook and he wrote out a check of £125,000, and he donated that to help us build the new Haveli. Yeah. So then people are saying he's a freeloader, he never gives anything. But after 30 years, he gave big, And since then, him and his family, we've kept in touch with them and helped them and tried to encourage them in the path of bhakti. And they've given so much, and they come and volunteer and do so many things. So for me,